Professor Zixathala's crystalline body caught the light from the massive viewing window as they stood before the holographic display. The alien professor had seen many foolish colonization attempts in their 300 years of life, but this one made their translucent form shimmer with worry. The humans wanted to colonize Frost 7, and they had no idea what they were walking into. The meeting room aboard the space station Kepler's Dream buzzed with conversation. Representatives from 12 different alien species sat around the curved table, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. But Zixthala only had eyes for the small group of humans at the far end of the table. They looked so confident, so sure of themselves. It would almost be funny if it wasn't so tragic. Commander Sarah Chen stood up, her dark hair pulled back in a military style. She was tall for a human, but still small compared to most of the aliens in the room. Her uniform was crisp and clean, covered in patches and medals that meant nothing to the other species present. She smiled as she activated her own holographic display. "Thank you all for coming today," Chen said, her voice clear and strong. "We're here to present our colonization plan for the planet designated Frost 7. We believe this world offers incredible opportunities for expansion and resource gathering." The hologram showed a white and blue planet spinning slowly in space. Ice covered almost everything, broken only by dark spots where mountains pushed through the frozen surface. Storm systems swirled across the continents, massive white spirals that looked beautiful from space but deadly up close. Zixathala's internal temperature dropped as they watched the display. They had studied Frost 7 for decades. They knew every terrible detail about that frozen nightmare of a world. The professor's mandibles clicked together, a sound that their translator turned into a nervous cough for the other species to understand. "The mineral deposits on Frost 7 are extraordinary," Chen continued, pointing to areas marked in red on the hologram. "Rare earth elements, precious metals, and energy crystals are all present in large quantities. The planet's location also makes it perfect as a stepping stone to the Outer Rim territories." Murmurs went around the table. Several aliens leaned forward with interest. The economics made sense, Zixthala had to admit. Frost 7 was valuable, but value meant nothing if you were dead. Chen clicked to the next image, showing detailed plans for a human settlement. Domed buildings connected by covered walkways, landing pads for ships, mining equipment designed for cold weather operations. It all looked very neat and organized on the hologram. Reality would be much different. "Our timeline calls for the first colonization wave to begin in 6 months, Chen said. "We'll send 10,000 volunteers in the initial group, with supply ships following every 3 months. We estimate full mining operations can begin within 2 years. Zixthala could not stay quiet any longer. The professor stood up, their crystalline form catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at them. "Commander Chen," Zixthala said, their voice coming through the translator with a musical tone. "I must stop you there. Your species cannot survive on Frost 7 without proper shelter infrastructure. This planet has destroyed 17 previous colonization attempts from species far better adapted to cold environments than humans." Chen's smile faded slightly, but she remained polite. "Professor, we appreciate your concern. We've studied the previous attempts and believe our technology has advanced enough to overcome the challenges." Zixthala's form pulsed with different colors, showing their growing distress. They activated their own holographic display, and the room filled with images of failed colonies, broken buildings buried in ice, equipment twisted by impossible winds, the frozen remains of alien settlements that had tried and failed to tame Frost 7. "The Crystalline Collective attempted colonization 70 years ago," Zixthala explained. "My own people can survive temperatures that would instantly kill humans. We can process radiation that would burn through your ships. We lived on Frost 7 for 3 months before the seismic activity destroyed our settlements." The images changed to show massive cracks in the ice, chasms that opened without warning and swallowed entire buildings, earthquakes that registered on sensors from orbit. Frost 7 was not just cold, it was violently unstable. "The Thermal Federation tried next," the professor continued. "They have natural fur that keeps them warm in conditions no human could survive. Their colony lasted 6 months before the atmospheric pressure changes killed them all." More images appeared, alien bodies with thick fur coats, their faces frozen in permanent expressions of surprise, emergency shelters that had collapsed when the air itself became too thin to breathe. weather patterns that changed without warning, turning survivable conditions into death traps in minutes. 17 different species have tried to colonize Frost 7, Zixathala said, their voice growing more urgent. Each one believed they had advantages the others lacked. Each one was wrong. The planet's surface temperature reaches negative 180 degrees Celsius. The winds carry ice crystals sharp enough to cut through metal. The ground shifts constantly as underground thermal vents change direction. The room was completely quiet now. Even the humans looked uncomfortable as the images continued to cycle through scenes of destruction and death. But Chen's expression remained determined. "We understand the risks, Professor," Chen said carefully. "But humans have successfully colonized many worlds that other species said were impossible. We have a different approach to environmental challenges." Zixthala's form flickered with what the translator interpreted as frustrated laughter. "Commander, your species has many admirable qualities. Your determination is legendary throughout the galaxy, but determination cannot keep you alive when the air freezes in your lungs. Technology cannot protect you when the ground opens beneath your feet." The professor changed the display to show charts and graphs, temperature readings that dropped below what most species considered survivable, atmospheric pressure that changed by dangerous amounts every few hours, seismic activity that followed no predictable pattern. "Look at these numbers," Zixthala pleaded. "Your environmental suits can handle cold, but not this cold. Your heating systems can warm buildings, but not when the power source is buried under 50 meters of ice in an earthquake. Your medical facilities cannot treat someone whose blood has literally frozen in their veins." Other aliens around the table began to nod in agreement. The reptilian delegate hissed softly, which meant they thought the humans were being foolish. The gaseous representative's containment suit glowed with patterns that showed concern. Even the machine intelligence, which rarely showed emotion, sparked with what looked like worry. But the humans did not look convinced. Chen glanced at her team, and Zixthala saw something in their faces that made the professor's crystalline heart sink. The humans were not going to listen. They had already made up their minds. "Professor Zixthala," Chen said formally, "we thank you for your input. The Galactic Council's concerns are noted and will be included in our final planning documents. However, humanity has decided to proceed with the colonization of Frost 7. The professor's form went completely clear, a sign of shock in their species. Around the table, other aliens made sounds of disbelief. The machine intelligence's lights blinked rapidly, processing the illogical decision. "Commander," Zixthala said quietly, "I have studied hostile environments for 3 centuries. I have seen the aftermath of failed colonies across the galaxy. Frost 7 is not just another difficult world. It is a death world. If you proceed with this plan, you will be sending 10,000 humans to their deaths." Chen stood straighter, her jaw set with determination. "Professor, with all due respect, humans did not become a spacefaring species by avoiding dangerous worlds. We became spacefaring by conquering them." As the meeting ended and the various delegates filed out, Zixthala remained standing by the window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, Frost 7 waited like a white and blue trap, beautiful and deadly. The professor began to compose their final report on what they expected to be the most thoroughly documented extinction of a sentient species in galactic history. The massive colony ship Perseverance moved through space like a floating city. Inside its metal walls, 10,000 humans prepared for what most of the galaxy considered a suicide mission. Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge, watching the stars streak past as the ship traveled faster than light toward Frost 7. Behind her, the bridge crew worked quietly at their stations, checking systems and monitoring the ship's progress. 3 months had passed since the meeting at Kepler's Dream. 3 months of preparation, training, and warnings from every corner of the galaxy. The Galactic Council had officially recommended against the mission. News broadcasts across dozens of worlds showed experts explaining why humans could not possibly survive on Frost 7. Betting pools had opened on how quickly the colony would fail. None of it mattered to the humans aboard the Perseverance. Chen touched a control, and screens throughout the ship flickered to life. In cargo bays and living quarters, in workshops and medical centers, 10,000 faces turned to look at their commander. These were volunteers, every single one of them. They had signed up knowing the risks, knowing that they might never see Earth again. "Attention, colonists," Chen said, her voice carrying to every corner of the ship. In 72 hours, we will arrive at Frost 7. I want to take this opportunity to address some of the concerns that have been raised about our mission. She pressed another control, and Professor Zixthala's presentation began to play on the screens. Images of failed colonies appeared throughout the ship. Broken buildings, twisted metal, the frozen bodies of aliens who had tried and failed to tame the ice planet. Chen let the footage play for several minutes before speaking again. You've all seen these images before, she said. The professor was right about many things. Frost 7 is one of the most hostile environments in known space. 17 different species have tried to colonize it, and 17 different species have failed. The planet has killed thousands of beings who were better adapted to cold than we are. In the cargo bay, Engineer Rodriguez looked up from the equipment he was checking. Around him, other crew members stopped their work to listen. The footage continued to play, showing the terrible conditions on Frost 7. Ice storms that could strip flesh from bone, earthquakes that opened chasms in seconds, temperature swings that could freeze blood in minutes. But here's what Professor Zixthala didn't understand, Chen continued. Every species that tried to colonize Frost 7 failed because they relied on their natural advantages. The crystalline collective trusted their ability to survive radiation and cold. The Thermal Federation relied on their thick fur and natural insulation. They went to Frost 7 thinking their biology would save them. The screens changed to show the human colonization plans. Unlike the previous attempts, which had focused on using natural abilities to survive, the human approach was completely different. Everything was technological. Heated habitats that could be assembled quickly, geothermal taps to provide power from the planet's core, underground tunnel systems to avoid the worst weather, atmospheric processors to create breathable air in enclosed spaces. We're going to succeed where they failed because we know something they didn't, Chen said. We know that we are completely unsuited for this environment. Our biology gives us no advantages on Frost 7. We can't survive the cold, we can't breathe the atmosphere, and we can't handle the radiation. So instead of relying on biology, we're going to rely on technology. Chief Medical Officer Park nodded as she listened from the medical bay. She had spent months developing new treatments for cold exposure, radiation poisoning, and atmospheric pressure problems. Her team had invented new medicines and surgical techniques specifically for Frost 7's conditions. They were not trying to change human biology to match the planet. They were creating technology to protect unchanged humans. Look around you, Chen said. Everything you see on this ship is designed for one purpose: keeping humans alive in places where humans shouldn't be able to live. Our spacesuits don't just protect us from vacuum, they create Earth-normal conditions inside them. Our habitats don't just keep out the cold, they maintain temperature, pressure, and atmosphere identical to Earth. The screens showed detailed plans for the colony, modular buildings that could be connected in different ways depending on conditions, power systems that drew energy from multiple sources, life support that could adapt to changing atmospheric conditions, transportation systems designed to work in extreme weather. Everything was built to be flexible, adaptable, and redundant. The previous colonization attempts failed because they tried to adapt to Frost 7, Chen explained. We're not going to adapt to Frost 7. We're going to bring Earth with us. In the workshops, teams of engineers and technicians continued their final preparations. They were building equipment that no other species had ever needed. Robots designed to work in conditions that would instantly kill their creators. Automated systems that could function even when cut off from human control. Backup systems for the backup systems. Rodriguez called up the geological surveys on his personal screen. The data was not encouraging. Frost 7's underground thermal vents moved constantly, following patterns that seemed random. The surface ice was sometimes thin enough to fall through, sometimes thick enough to support buildings. Seismic activity could strike anywhere at any time. But the humans had planned for all of it. Their buildings were designed to move if necessary. Their power systems could switch between geothermal, solar, nuclear, and chemical sources depending on conditions. Their mining equipment was automated and expendable. If it was destroyed by an earthquake or storm, new equipment could be built to replace it. The other species made the mistake of thinking Frost 7 was a place to live. Chen continued. They built permanent settlements and tried to make the planet their home. We're not trying to make Frost 7 our home. We're trying to make it profitable. This was the key difference in the human approach. Previous colonization attempts had focused on creating comfortable living spaces where the colonists could settle permanently. The humans were thinking like miners and engineers. They wanted to extract resources and get out. Comfort was secondary to efficiency and survival. The screens showed mining plans that looked more like military operations than civilian settlements. Teams would work in shifts, spending limited time in the most dangerous areas before rotating to safety. Equipment would be operated remotely when possible. The entire operation was designed around the assumption that the environment was actively trying to kill them. "We have advantages that the previous colonists didn't have," Chen said. "We have better technology, better planning, and better understanding of what we're facing. But our biggest advantage is that we're not trying to prove we belong on Frost 7. We're trying to prove that we can take what we need from Frost 7 and leave." Across the galaxy, news broadcasts were already calling the mission a disaster waiting to happen. Expert panels discussed the many ways humans would fail where superior species had already tried and died. The general consensus was that the humans would last 3 months at most before requesting evacuation. Professor Zixathala watched these broadcasts from their laboratory, their crystalline form reflecting the light and patterns of deep concern. They had begun documenting everything about the human mission, expecting to write the definitive study on species overconfidence and its tragic consequences. But something in Commander Chen's speech bothered the professor. The humans were not approaching Frost 7 the way other species had. They were not trying to adapt to the planet's conditions. They were planning to impose their own conditions on small parts of the planet. It was an approach no other species had tried, mainly because it seemed impossible. "In 72 hours we will make history," Chen concluded her speech. "Not because we are the first species to try colonizing Frost 7, but because we will be the first species to succeed. We will succeed because we are not trying to become the kind of species that can live on Frost 7. We are bringing the technology that will let us live anywhere." The screens went dark, and throughout the ship, 10,000 humans returned to their preparations. They checked equipment, reviewed procedures, and made final adjustments to plans that had been years in the making. Outside the ship's windows, space continued to stream past as they approached their destination. None of them knew that they were about to prove everything the galaxy thought it knew about colonization completely wrong. The first month on Frost 7 was worse than anyone had imagined, even the humans who thought they were prepared for everything. Commander Chen stood in the main command center, looking at casualty reports that made her stomach turn. 800 people dead in 30 days. The galaxy's betting pools were paying out early, convinced the colony would collapse within weeks. But something was happening that the bookmakers and experts didn't understand. The humans were not giving up. The landing had gone almost perfectly. The 10 ships of the colonization fleet had touched down in a valley that geological surveys said was stable. The automated systems had begun setting up the first habitats within hours. For the first few days, everything worked exactly as planned. Then Frost 7 showed them why 17 other species had failed. The ice storms were nothing like the weather reports had described. The wind didn't just carry frozen water. It carried particles of rock and metal that had been ground down by centuries of storms. These particles moved at hundreds of kilometers per hour, turning the air itself into a weapon that could strip paint from metal and flesh from bone in seconds. Chen remembered the first storm clearly. Warning sirens had gone off as wind speeds climbed beyond what their equipment could measure. The colonists had taken shelter in the reinforced habitats, thinking they were safe behind walls designed to withstand anything Frost 7 could throw at them. The storm had lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 3 habitats were completely gone, torn apart by winds carrying chunks of ice the size of vehicles. 47 people had died instantly when their shelter failed. Another 30 had died from exposure in the few minutes it took rescue teams to reach them. Dr. Park worked around the clock in the medical center, treating injuries that no Earth doctor had ever seen. Frostbite that went through clothing and skin to freeze muscle tissue, cuts from ice particles that were sharp enough to slice through protective gear. Radiation poisoning from particles in the storm that contained radioactive minerals from deep underground. "The atmospheric readings are all wrong," reported meteorologist Williams during one of the daily briefings. "The composition changes every few hours. Sometimes there's enough oxygen to breathe. Sometimes the air is mostly carbon dioxide. Sometimes there are gases we can't even identify." The geological surveys had been wrong too. Chief Engineer Rodriguez stood in what used to be the main power station, looking at a crack in the ground that was 3 meters wide and seemed to go down forever. The geothermal tap that was supposed to provide power for months had been swallowed by an earthquake that registered 0 on their sensors until the ground actually opened up. The thermal vents don't stay in one place, Rodriguez explained to Chen. They move around underground like living things. Our power grid was designed around taps that would stay stable for years. Instead, we lose power sources every few days when the vents shift direction. The death toll climbed steadily. Equipment failures killed people when their environmental suits lost power during storms. Exposure incidents happened when colonists got lost in conditions where visibility dropped to 0 in minutes. 3 catastrophic habitat breaches had wiped out entire sections of the colony when seals failed under pressure changes that nobody had predicted. Across the galaxy, news networks began running memorial broadcasts. Professor Zixthala published papers with titles like The Frost 7 Tragedy, When Determination Exceeds Biology and Case Study in Species. Overconfidence. The general consensus was that the humans had proven the professor right in the most tragic way possible, but the humans on Frost 7 were not behaving like a dying colony. Instead of evacuating or requesting rescue, they adapted. Every disaster became a learning experience. Every equipment failure led to design improvements. Every death was followed by changes to procedures that would prevent the same type of accident from happening again. When the ice storms proved more dangerous than expected, the humans didn't build stronger shelters. They built mobile shelters that could be moved quickly when storms approached. When the atmospheric composition proved unpredictable, they didn't try to find patterns. They built sensors that could detect changes instantly and adjust life support systems automatically. We're not trying to predict what Frost 7 will do next, Chen explained during a video call with Earth. We're building systems that can handle anything Frost 7 does, whether we predict it or not. The approach was completely different from what other species had tried. Previous colonization attempts had focused on understanding the planet's patterns and building permanent structures to withstand known threats. The humans assumed there were no patterns and built everything to be temporary and replaceable. When earthquakes destroyed their geothermal taps, they built new taps that could be installed in hours instead of days. When storms damaged their equipment, they built equipment designed to be repaired quickly with spare parts. When habitat modules were destroyed, they had new modules ready to deploy from automated factories that worked around the clock. Most importantly, the humans learned to work in shifts that no other species could manage. While some colonists slept in the safest areas, others worked in the most dangerous zones, maximizing productivity while minimizing exposure time. Teams would spend 4 hours outside in environmental suits, then 8 hours inside in safety, then 4 hours on light duty, then 8 hours sleeping. We can't survive on Frost 7 the way other species tried to survive, explained Shift Supervisor Martinez, so we're not trying to survive here. We're trying to work here, then go somewhere safe to live. The distinction was crucial. Other species had tried to make Frost 7 their home. The humans were treating it like a job site, a dangerous place where you did necessary work before returning to safety. The death rate, which had climbed steadily for the first 3 weeks, began to stabilize. New deaths still occurred, but not as many as before. The colony systems were becoming more reliable. The colonists were becoming more experienced. Most importantly, they were adapting faster than the planet could kill them. By the end of the first month, something unprecedented was happening. The daily casualty reports were showing fewer deaths, not more. Equipment failure rates were dropping. Emergency evacuations were becoming rare instead of routine. Professor Zixthala received these reports with growing confusion. The data contradicted everything known about hostile environment colonization. Species were supposed to suffer increasing casualties as conditions wore down their equipment and morale. Instead, the humans seemed to be getting better at surviving Frost 7 with each passing day. It makes no sense, the professor told their research team. Their mortality rate should be climbing exponentially. Instead, it's approaching statistical stability. How are they adapting to conditions that killed more environmentally suited species? The answer was in the daily reports that Chen sent back to Earth. Each report was filled with technical innovations born from desperation. New materials synthesized from local ice and rock. Equipment modifications that improved performance in extreme conditions. Procedural changes that reduced exposure time and increased efficiency. We've built 37 different types of environmental suits in the past month, reported Chief Technology Officer Kumar. Each one is designed for specific conditions we've encountered. We're not trying to build one suit that works everywhere. We're building specialized equipment for specialized threats. Other galactic species began requesting copies of these reports. The innovations the humans were developing had applications far beyond Frost 7. Materials that could withstand extreme temperature changes. Atmospheric processors that could adapt to changing conditions automatically. Modular construction techniques that allowed rapid deployment and repair. Most intriguingly, other species began reconsidering their own colonization strategies. The human approach of assuming the worst possible conditions and planning accordingly was something no other species had tried. Most had relied on their natural advantages and built around their strengths. The humans had no natural advantages, so they built around their weaknesses. "We're going to make it," Chen told her senior staff at the end of the first month. "Not because we're stronger than the other species that tried. Not because we're smarter or better prepared. We're going to make it because we knew from the beginning that we couldn't make it without help from our technology." Outside the command center, Frost 7 continued its assault on the human colony. Storms raged across the ice. Earthquakes split the ground without warning. And the atmosphere changed composition like a living thing trying to poison anything that breathed it. But inside their mobile shelters and adaptive habitats, 10,000 humans continued their work, learning something new about survival every day, and proving that sometimes the best way to handle an impossible situation is to assume it's impossible and plan accordingly. 6 months after landing on Frost 7, the human colony had become something that no galactic observer could have predicted. What had started as a desperate survival mission had transformed into the most successful hostile environment operation in recorded history. Commander Chen stood in the new command center, watching displays that showed a thriving settlement of 12,000 people, larger than the original colony due to supply ships, that had arrived carrying volunteers eager to join the success. The breakthrough had come through a combination of factors that no other species had ever considered. First, humans had proven uniquely suited to collaborative adaptation. Where other species relied on individual biological advantages, humans created collective, technological solutions that improved with each challenge they faced. "We've stopped thinking of Frost 7 as a planet we need to survive on," explained Chief Engineer Rodriguez during a tour for visiting galactic observers. "Now we think of it as a puzzle we need to solve one piece at a time." The evidence was visible everywhere. The human habitats no longer sat in fixed locations trying to withstand Frost 7's attacks. Instead, they moved constantly on massive mechanical legs, following geothermal vents as they shifted underground. When thermal activity moved, the buildings moved with it. When storms approached, entire sections of the colony could relocate to sheltered areas. The atmospheric processors had evolved far beyond their original design. Instead of trying to create stable atmospheric conditions in fixed areas, they now adapted automatically to changing weather patterns. Sensors throughout the colony detected atmospheric changes and adjusted life support systems in real time. What had once been a constant threat of suffocation had become a managed inconvenience. "Look at this," said Mining Supervisor Chen, leading the observers to the extraction operations. Instead of large, permanent mining equipment that could be destroyed by earthquakes or storms, the humans had developed swarm mining technology. Hundreds of small expendable robots worked together to extract resources, with individual units designed to be replaced quickly when damaged. "Each robot costs almost nothing to build," Chen explained as they watched the machines work. "When a storm destroys 50 of them, we build 50 new ones. When an earthquake buries 100, we deploy 100 more. We're not trying to protect expensive equipment from Frost 7. We're using equipment so cheap that Frost 7 can't hurt us by destroying." The galactic observers watched in amazement as the mining swarms adapted to changing conditions. Without human intervention, when the ground became unstable, the robots spread out to reduce pressure on any single point. When atmospheric conditions changed, they automatically switched to different extraction methods. When new threats appeared, the swarms evolved new behaviors within hours. But the most impressive development was the terraforming operations that had begun ahead of schedule. The humans were not just surviving Frost 7, they were actively changing it. Underground fungal farms provided fresh food using nutrients extracted from the planet's ice and rock. Atmospheric processors slowly increased oxygen levels in enclosed valleys. Reflective satellites in orbit directed solar radiation to specific locations, creating pockets of improved climate. Dr. Park showed the observers through the agricultural sections, where Earth plants grew in carefully controlled environments. "We're not trying to make the whole planet like Earth," she explained. "We're creating small Earth-like spaces and connecting them with protected transportation routes." The transportation system was another marvel of human engineering. Instead of roads or tunnels that could be destroyed by seismic activity, the humans had built a network of mobile platforms that could adapt to changing terrain. Vehicles moved on tracks that could be quickly relocated when the ground shifted. Supply lines used automated systems that could find new routes when old ones became impassable. "We call it the adaptive infrastructure principle," explained Systems Coordinator Williams. "Instead of building permanent structures that resist change, we build flexible structures that change with the environment. When Frost 7 shifts, we shift with it." The principle extended to every aspect of the colony. Living quarters could be reconfigured based on population needs. Work areas could be expanded or contracted depending on current projects. Even the command center could be moved if necessary, with all essential systems designed to function during relocation. Most importantly, the humans had developed a rotation system that maximized efficiency while minimizing risk. Teams worked in the most dangerous areas for short periods before rotating to safer assignments. This allowed continuous operations in conditions that would be fatal for extended exposure, while ensuring that no individual colonist faced excessive risk. "We learned this from deep-sea operations on Earth," explained Rotation Manager Davis. "You don't try to live at the bottom of the ocean. You work there for short periods, then return to safe areas. Same principle applies here." The results were undeniable. Resource extraction rates exceeded all projections. Casualty rates had dropped to levels comparable with routine industrial operations on civilized worlds. Most remarkably, the colonists reported high morale and job satisfaction despite working in one of the most hostile environments known to galactic science. Other species began requesting detailed information about human survival techniques. The Crystalline Collective wanted to license the mobile habitat technology. The Thermal Federation inquired about atmospheric adaptation systems. Even the machine intelligence expressed interest in the swarm robotics principles. "The requests are pouring in daily," Chen told her senior staff during a planning meeting. "Every major spacefaring species wants to understand how we're doing what we're doing." The answer, according to the detailed reports being sent throughout the galaxy, lay in the fundamental difference between human and alien approaches to hostile environments. Other species tried to use their natural advantages to overcome environmental challenges. Humans assumed they had no natural advantages and therefore created technological advantages that were superior to anything biology could provide. "We're not stronger than the Crystalline Collective," explained Technology Development Chief Kumar during a broadcast interview. "We're not better adapted to cold than the Thermal Federation. We're not more resistant to radiation than any of the other species that tried to colonize Frost 7. But we're better at admitting our weaknesses and building technology to compensate for them." The technology being developed on Frost 7 had applications far beyond the ice planet. Materials that could withstand extreme temperature fluctuations were revolutionizing spacecraft design. Atmospheric processors that could adapt to changing conditions were being installed on marginal worlds throughout the galaxy. Modular construction techniques were being adopted for space stations and orbital habitats. Professor Zixathala received daily updates from monitoring stations with increasing bewilderment. The data contradicted everything known about species survival limits. The humans were not just adapting to Frost 7, they were demonstrating a form of technological evolution in real time. "They're changing faster than the environment can kill them," the professor noted in their research journal. "This should not be possible. Individual organisms cannot evolve quickly enough to survive in rapidly changing hostile environments." But humans are not relying on individual evolution. They are creating collective technological evolution. The concept was unprecedented in galactic science. Species were known to adapt to environments over generations through biological evolution. Some species could modify their behavior quickly through learning, but no species had ever demonstrated the ability to create technological solutions that evolved faster than environmental threats. "We're not trying to become a species that can live on Frost 7, Chen explained during a major conference broadcast. "We're creating technology that can live on Frost 7, and then we live inside that technology." The distinction was crucial and revolutionary. Every previous colonization attempt had tried to prove that their species was suited for the target environment. The humans had succeeded by proving that their species was completely unsuited for Frost 7, then creating an artificial environment that could exist anywhere. By the end of the 6th month, betting pools that had once focused on predicting human extinction timelines were now speculating about how quickly humans would terraform the entire planet. The impossible had become inevitable, and the galaxy was trying to understand how a species with no natural advantages had achieved what more advanced species could not. "We're going to change Frost 7 completely," Chen told the assembled colonists during a celebration marking their 6-month survival milestone. "Not because we're stronger than the planet, but because we're smart enough to know that we're weaker than the planet, and we're willing to do something about it." Outside the celebration hall, Frost 7 continued its eternal assault of storms, earthquakes, and atmospheric chaos, but inside their adaptive shelters and mobile habitats, 12,000 humans continued their work of proving that sometimes the greatest strength is knowing your weaknesses and building accordingly. 1 year after the human colonization of Frost 7 had begun, Professor Zixathala stood before the same auditorium at Kepler's Dream where they had once warned against the mission. This time, the crystalline professor's body reflected the lights in patterns of wonder and confusion, rather than concern. The holographic displays around the room showed images that no galactic scientist had thought possible: a thriving human settlement on the deadliest planet in known space. "Colleagues," Zixathala began, their voice carrying through the translator with musical tones that indicated deep thought. "I stand before you today to discuss the most significant development in colonization science in recorded history. 1 year ago, I warned that humans could not survive on Frost 7 without proper shelter. I was completely correct in my assessment." The audience of alien scientists, government officials, and military observers leaned forward with interest. Representatives from dozens of species had come to hear the professor's analysis of the human success. The room contained crystalline beings like Zixathala, furry thermals, gaseous entities in containment suits, and mechanical intelligences whose optical sensors focused intently on the speaker. "What I failed to understand," the professor continued, "is that humans never intended to survive without shelter. They intended to bring shelter with them, improve it continuously, and then expand it until the shelter became larger than the threat." The holographic displays came alive with footage from the Frost 7 colony. Humans in advanced environmental suits moved across the ice with confidence that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. Children played in heated underground parks that had been carved from solid ice and rock. Farmers tended to genetically modified crops in climate-controlled greenhouses that maintained Earth-normal conditions regardless of the chaos outside. The human colony now houses 15,000 individuals, Zixathala reported. This number includes not only the original colonists and supply mission personnel, but also their first generation of children born on Frost 7. These children are developing in an environment that should be instantly lethal to human life, yet they are healthier than the galactic average for their species. Images showed human children taking their first steps in underground playgrounds, learning to walk on a world that had killed members of 17 other species. The contrast was striking. Outside the protected areas, Frost 7 continued its relentless assault of storms and earthquakes, while inside the human-created spaces, normal life continued as if the planet's hostility did not exist. The key to understanding human success lies in recognizing the fundamental difference in their approach, the professor explained. Every previous species that attempted to colonize Frost 7 relied on their evolutionary advantages. The crystalline collective used our natural resistance to cold and radiation. The Thermal Federation relied on their biological insulation. Each species tried to prove that they were suited for Frost 7's environment. The displays showed records of the failed attempts, but now they were presented as case studies rather than tragedies. Each previous colonization effort had followed the same pattern: deploy natural abilities, build permanent structures, attempt to establish a sustainable presence using species-specific advantages. Humans succeeded because they assumed they had no evolutionary advantages, Zixthala continued. This assumption forced them to create technological advantages that proved superior to anything biology could provide. Rather than adapting themselves to Frost 7, they adapted Frost 7 to themselves. The evidence was overwhelming. The human colony had not just survived, it had begun transforming the planet. Atmospheric processors had created breathable air in sealed valleys. Thermal regulation systems had established temperate zones around the settlements. Underground networks connected climate-controlled spaces across hundreds of kilometers. Observe the human approach to atmospheric management, the professor said, highlighting sections of the colony where humans had created Earth-normal air composition. Previous species tried to filter Frost 7's atmosphere or supplement it with breathing apparatus. Humans simply replaced it entirely within their operational areas. The same principle applied to every aspect of the colony. Instead of trying to work with Frost 7's unstable geology, humans had built structures that could move when the ground shifted. Instead of trying to predict the planet's weather patterns, they had created mobile operations that could relocate ahead of dangerous storms. Instead of trying to find stable thermal vents, they had built systems that could tap any heat source and switch between them as conditions changed. The humans have introduced a new concept to colonization science, Zixthala explained. Technological evolution. Where biological evolution requires generations to develop useful adaptations, human technology evolves daily through deliberate modification and improvement. The displays showed time-lapse sequences of human equipment changing over the course of the year. Mining robots that had started as simple mechanical devices had evolved into sophisticated swarms capable of independent decision-making. Atmospheric processors that had once required constant human supervision now operated autonomously while adapting to changing conditions. Habitat modules that had been basic shelters had become complex environmental systems that could recreate any planetary conditions. Most remarkably, the professor continued, humans have begun terraforming operations that exceed the original colony projections. They are not just surviving on Frost 7, they are transforming it into a planet suitable for their species. The images showed vast, underground farms where earth plants grew in soil, created from processed ice and rock, surface installations that captured solar radiation and redirected it to warm specific areas, atmospheric modification systems that were slowly changing the composition of Frost 7's air in localized regions. The human approach challenges fundamental assumptions about species-environment relationships, Zixthala said. Traditional colonization theory assumes that species must adapt to planetary conditions. Humans have demonstrated that sufficiently advanced technology can adapt planetary conditions to species requirements. The implications extended far beyond Frost 7. Other human colonies throughout the galaxy were reporting similar successes on worlds previously considered unsuitable for colonization. Desert planets were being transformed with atmospheric processors. Ocean worlds were being developed with floating cities. Even vacuum environments were being colonized, with enclosed habitats that created artificial, planetary conditions. We must acknowledge that humans represent a new category of spacefaring species, the professor announced. They are the first known example of an adaptive technological species. Beings whose survival strategy involves real-time technological evolution rather than biological adaptation. The designation was already being incorporated into xenobiology textbooks throughout the galaxy. Human colonization techniques were being studied by every major spacefaring civilization. Military strategists were analyzing the implications of a species that could establish viable settlements in any environment through technological adaptation. A holographic transmission activated, showing Commander Chen in her office on Frost 7. Behind her, through a reinforced window, the aurora of a transformed atmosphere painted the sky in colors that had never existed on the planet before human arrival. The light shifted from the harsh whites and blues of natural Frost 7 weather to softer greens and purples created by atmospheric modification systems. Professor Zixthala, Chen said with a smile that was visible even through the holographic distortion, I want to thank you for your warning a year ago. You were absolutely right. We couldn't survive on Frost 7 without shelter, so we brought our own sky. The image panned to show the view outside Chen's office, where once there had been only ice and rock. Now there were cultivated gardens growing under atmospheric domes. Children played in parks that maintained Earth-normal temperature and pressure. Adults worked in outdoor environments that their unprotected biology could never have survived. The colony now produces more resources than we consume, Chen reported. We're not just self-sufficient, we're profitable. Frost 7 has become one of the most productive mining operations in this sector of the galaxy. And we're expanding operations to the southern continent next month. The transmission ended, leaving the auditorium in stunned silence. Professor Zixthala's crystalline form reflected, the lights and patterns that indicated deep satisfaction, mixed with scientific humility. I have studied hostile environments for 3 centuries, the professor concluded. I have observed the rise and fall of civilizations across dozens of worlds. The human colonization of Frost 7 represents the most significant advancement in survival technology I have witnessed. They have not just proven that determination can overcome environmental challenges, they have proven that the right kind of determination can overcome the concept of environmental limitation itself. As the presentation ended and delegates began filing out to discuss the implications, Zixthala remained at the podium, looking out at the stars through the station's massive viewing ports. Somewhere among those stars, 15,000 humans were living and working on a world that should have killed them all within days.